Yeah.
Three,
One-
2, 1. Welcome to SyrupCast episode 21. Happy winter.
Feels like Christmas. Snow is
As
falling.
it is, it's
around.
actually snowing right now. It's the first snow of the year in Toronto. And joining me for this wonderful occasion, Douglas Soltis. How are you, sir?
Welcome to 4 months of bullshit.
Bullshit.
Aw,
And
guys, you're so
Jane,
harsh.
the only positive person among us.
Wait till we start talking about those phones. They're gonna shit all over them. Kidding.
What, the mid-range madness?
No, we talk about those. Let us never speak of them again.
Okay, yeah, the Predator phone is dead to us.
Yeah.
If you're a manufacturer of a mid-range phone, make sure to email Jane, and she will review it.
And be very fair. She was fair. You were
I was
very, very
fair.
fair with those phones. And I actually got an email from the guy who does the PR for the ZTE phone, and he said that his client, ZTE, was actually quite happy with your review. So I guess that's a good thing.
Well, I did try and see the bright side and find the positives in all those phones.
You did, absolutely.
Yeah.
ZTE was like one of the better ones, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't a thing. There was nothing wrong with it, and it couldn't be beat on price. Battery life was great. Except
was
I had a bone to pick, which was that ZTE has announced a graph in some variation for over the last 2 years in a bajillion different countries. So when I was looking, I was trying to read more about this phone, and I had so much trouble trying to find the specific right phone because there were so many different variations of the Grand X.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the one that I reviewed, it's maybe exclusive to Canada, that specific spec sheet.
It is. It's like Samsung circa 2011 when they made a different
Yeah.
smartphone for each carrier. ZTE actually, the guy emailed me and said, do you mind changing the spec sheet on your review because it said 2200 milliamps instead of 2400?
Yeah.
And we were like, what are you talking about? The 22 is the only one that we could find online. He's like, yeah, Canada got 200 milliamps bonus,
Because it's cold.
I mean, they just managed to find an extra 200 milliamps for the phone.
Yeah, I tried so hard, and the closest I could find was because I ended up just looking at picture after picture of ZTE phone and trying to find okay, is this the phone? Is this the phone? And they're all the Grand X, and they all look different. And the only one that I could find, and I was like, this is it. I finally found it. And then I looked at the picture of the back of the phone, and it had an 8 megapixel camera instead of a 5 megapixel camera. And I was like, motherfucker, this is not the same one either. So I ended up going with the specs from that phone and then just changing the camera.
Well, I think the next time you do that, just go download CPU Z, which is basically the only way to verify all the information for that.
Yeah.
Because that's what I do. I mean, when I found out that the Desire 510 didn't have a 64-bit chip in Canada, I found out about it after we'd written about it.
Yeah.
And HTC emailed me and they were like, oh, by the way, the North American variant of our shitty phone doesn't have a 64-bit chip. And I don't think that was verbatim, but they said, we don't understand or we don't know why HTC made this decision, but maybe the 410 was in lower supply, and really nobody gives a shit, right?
That was the only redeeming quality for that phone was that it was HTC's first 64-bit phone.
Which is not saying much because the 64-bit-ness of it doesn't make it a faster phone.
That's like saying, look at this amazing stereo I have in my awful Nissan Versa.
I had a Nissan Versa.
That's like missing a tire.
And it was also missing a tire.
Really?
No. But I did blow a flat on the highway once, and it was really unfortunate and sad.
Predator mode car.
Yeah. So let's get into the Nexus 6 because I published my really long review this week, and you both had the pleasure of having to edit it. And everybody, every site who had a phone published at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. So I think our review did get a bit of, it got a ton of great comments, and thank you everybody for reading it if you did. But it was really interesting seeing how diverse the opinions were of the phone. I know you two have both used it a little. What do you guys think? I mean, is this now that we can talk kind of more freely about it? Is this something that you think you'll be picking up when it goes on for pre-order next week on the 18th?
I'm not made of money, so no. But I would want it.
So you don't think the size is the issue? It's the price.
The price is the issue, just because I said this earlier on in the office, is that every time I read a review of Daniel's, I find some glaring problem with the device that I just can't get past, that I otherwise wouldn't have known until I just thrown my money away on it, which means that I can't actually
thus justifying the review.
But I can't make impulse decisions on sexy gadgets that I want. Because if I had my way, I'd just be rubbing phones all over myself. But I read Daniel's reviews, and I'm like, fuck, I got something I can't get past. And for me, the price is too high for the camera, low light performance in the camera is kind of sucky. And I'm like, I don't want to pay. If I'm paying that much for a phone, I want it to be everything. And it doesn't seem like it is. I don't mind the size. It's just, yeah. What about you, Doug?
Well, the interesting thing about the camera was that it seemed like the low light performance was so bad, but their HDR plus mode was so badass, which was weird just to see. I would never use a phone that big. Douglas, in 2014, the end of 2014, will never use a phone that big. Maybe 2015 Douglas might, but it's just too big.
Yeah, I was I had a really good use case on the way home today, where I was walking up, the street on the sidewalk, and I was listening to music, and I had a plastic bag in my left hand, and I had my Nexus 6 in my right, and I was trying to unlock the screen with my right thumb. So I was holding it like you would normally hold a phone, and I was literally just trying to get my thumb to the other side of the screen to unlock it without using my left hand to stabilize. And I couldn't. I mean, it's really hard to do that. You have to shift the phone in your hand while you're walking, or you can obviously stop walking, but I guess the whole idea is that you have this phone that limits you in the ways that you would want to use it.
Yeah.
And if it was the size of the OnePlus One or the HTC One M8, then it would be a lot easier. And I think I was reading Phil Nickinson's review on Android Central, and he made a good point. It's really not about the height of the device. The height, as long as a phone is well weighted throughout, it's not a big deal if it's tall. But if it's wide, like the Nexus 6 is and the iPhone 6 Plus, you run into issues where using it with one hand is just impossible, because your thumb can only extend so far unless you have, basically a completely double jointed thumb, which most people don't.
Also, your fears of dropping it too, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You talked about. I know. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I'm surprised I haven't dropped it once, because I've been using this for 2 weeks, and as it's gotten colder, it's feeling more and more likely that I'm just going to let it slip out of my hand one day.
You said in your review that some people kind of theorized that it's with the size it doesn't matter because they're trying to offload some of the on-the-go functionality to your watch, but that doesn't make sense to me because, one, I'm not finding that I can do anything significant on my watch that I can avoid taking my phone, but you still need two hands for your watch because you gotta go and stab at it. So I don't know, is it too awkward to use on the go?
Well, I mean, it depends what you mean on the go, right? 2 years ago, I don't think there were many people using their phones while they were walking down the sidewalk. It's just a change of behavior. People use their phones in situations where they wouldn't have dared using them 2 or 3 years ago. And that's just a cultural shift that I think people need to sort of reflect on and decide. Now that large phones are ubiquitous and using them with one hand is largely inconvenient, should we be trying to change the way that we use our phones? Is there a reason that we need to use our phones while we're walking down the sidewalk?
Well, I think generally the technology changes us, right? So it's much more likely that something's built and you purchase it without reading a review like Jane, and because you want to rub it all over your body, and then whatever that phone is and is designed to do and how that design is expressed, you you just kind of naturally like fit your way around it, or you reject it. It takes a lot of conscious effort to not use things in ways that the design kind of pushes you towards. Because at that point, just get something else. Like, get a one-handed phone. Use the iPhone 6. Use the one M8. Like, use... I don't know if you want to put the Moto X in there. It's at least smaller than the Nexus 6.
Yeah, the Moto X is smaller than the one M8.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough. If you're like, oh, look at this, look at how technology is evolving to the point where we have to like fight against it because it wasn't designed in a way that's useful, or like, you know, to offload stuff to a smartwatch because the phones are too big. I'm like, what are we doing here?
But I also think the other thing to keep in mind is that, you know, Samsung did a lot of work to make the Note 4 and previous Notes, but especially this one, more usable in one hand than typical Android smartphones, right? They actually rejigged the UI of Android to fit in a one-handed scenario when you need it, and then adjust to being a two-handed device when you want it. And the two-handed device is obviously, you know, in a situation when you aren't walking and you don't need to really worry about what's in your second hand. But I'm a little bit upset that Google really didn't do anything with stock Android 5 to improve the one-handed usability. I mean, there's nothing in there, not from a usability perspective and not from a functionality perspective. So, you know, Apple was really proud of the fact that they introduced APIs for developers that would allow two-pane you know, app designs when you turn the phone into landscape, or you could show more information using when it was in portrait because of the extra screen size. Android has always kind of adapted to different screen sizes, but Lollipop feels like there's just no considerations for the fact that so many people are going to be using this with large phones like the Nexus 6.
Well,
Yeah.
Samsung touts that. Samsung has stuff, but stock Androids, yeah, you're right, it's different.
Yeah, but it's also like, because you said, you know, you pointed out that Apple did it, Samsung did it, like Huawei did it with the SN Mate 2. Like, I don't think any of those solutions are like right. I don't think they're. I don't think anybody's really gotten it 100% right. But at least they're trying, and it does help to an extent. Like, it might not be super sexy, it might not be implemented in the best way, but at least it does go some way towards like using that usability pain point, which is that you can't use it when you walk down the road. And it's sad, yeah, it's sad that it seems like they didn't even try. They're just glossing over the fact that you can't use it.
Yeah, and I often walk, when I walk around, I'm often looking at how other people are using their phones. I take the streetcar every day, and you know, a very common use case is you're holding a pole to balance with one hand, and then you're using your phone with another.
Yeah. And
as you know, most people I see are either still using iPhones 5 or whatever, which have 4-inch screens, or they're using older Android phones. I don't often see people using huge phones yet, but I know that's going to happen. Eventually, people are going to start buying bigger phones because that's the way that the market is moving. And when that happens, you know, we're going to see a lot more people dropping their phones. And I mean, I see enough people with smashed screens anyway.
Oh.
You know, it's so... Isn't it crazy that people still use their phones?
Well, see, I get it to an extent that, like, not everyone can afford to replace their phone when it gets broken. But I also, yeah, it's like, I see people still using, like, people I know who, like, are still using it a year later. And that's crazy to me. It's like, I don't know.
Well, it's because I think people think that, like, they have to get a new phone or if they have to go to the carrier to get it fixed rather than finding those specialty shops that will do it for you.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I think there is that issue. Obviously, price is a major concern, but people don't really know where to go. If they don't have an iPhone, you know, if you drop your phone and your Samsung phone cracks, do you go to a Samsung store? Do you go to your carrier? I mean, Apple has that workflow pretty well sorted. They know that they've educated their customers. If you have any problem with a phone, regardless of where you bought it, bring it to an Apple store and they'll help you. They'll tell you it'll cost money, but at least you can get a replacement there. With carriers, I mean, TELUS has done a good job with their device protection plans and their one-on-one, learning centers and all that. But I mean, generally, you don't really know what to do when your phone breaks.
Yeah, I think that's something that's been a problem for so long, but it used to, I feel, not be as big an issue, because I know that when I had dumb phones and I had like Nokia devices like 10 years ago, if my phone broke, I would bring it to the shop where I bought it, which was the carrier, and I would be like, this doesn't work anymore, and they would be like, oh, well, we'll have to send it back to the manufacturer. But it was still like, it was generally understood that you go to the place where you bought it, because people back then just didn't buy off-contract phones. But now that it's like, oh, is that a Samsung? Is that like an LG? Now there's that disconnect where people are like, oh, I actually don't know who fixes my phone now.
But the phones also weren't entirely glass screens. So if you dropped it and it broke, you were breaking something internal, so you could get away. Like when you bring a phone in and it's just snowflakes, like what you did. I just woke up and it stopped. I don't know what happened. The screen just cracked by itself.
I think it's interesting that because the phones are getting so skinny and so thin that it's gonna be harder for people just to keep using those phones. Like, because once they reduce the space between the components of the display, those cracks are eventually going to start affecting. Like, I know that the Nexus 4, the digitizer and the touchscreen were so close together that if you drop the phone and the glass cracked, like, that was it. Like, that display was broken. They were so close.
Same with most phones today.
Yeah.
But so that's why I don't get why.
Yeah, and like with the iPhone 6, it's like the thing's like laminated onto the glass, right? Like,
is that the iPad 6 or is that the iPad Air 2?
Oh, the iPhone has been using a laminated display since the 4. Okay. It's the first time on the iPad, but I mean, I also think that when we broke our Nokia flip phones, we would go and they would give us a loaner phone that was essentially the exact same as the phone we brought in, because they were all identical. Now we have our lives on our phones, and they give you a BlackBerry torch, and they're like, hey, we had this sitting in a drawer. You can use this for 3 weeks while we get your phone repaired. And nobody's like, yeah, great, you're giving me a shitty 4-year-old BlackBerry.
No, what they say is, I dare you to break that torch. I double dog dare you to try, because that thing is
it's punishment.
You throw that through plaster.
Well, I mean, that's another thing. The reason they gave BlackBerries as loaners is because you can drop those things and they never break.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, going back to the Nexus, I think that it's a really great phone. I think the real story here is how amazing Lollipop is and how much work Google's done improving the overall usability of Android and how user-friendly it is. Just from the first time you turn it on, you can pair it with another Android phone and transfer all of your contacts and your apps. You can quickly access your notifications from the lock screen. You can, have multiple accounts on your phone. You can put on a Do Not Disturb mode. All of these things have been in Android phones, from different OEMs, across different price points. But they've never been in one place, and they've never been available to every OEM to implement, themselves. So this is going to be great for basically low-cost Android phones that have typically missed out on the high-end features because the companies like LG and Samsung just don't want to bother putting in all those high-end features into their $200 devices. Now that they're baked into Android, they can just say, they can put their skin on it and say, okay, we don't have to do anything else.
Yeah, it doesn't improve the high-end so much as it lowers the baseline experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, the high-end stuff is also really improved because the Android runtime makes everything run smoother on older hardware as well. It has 64-bit support, so next year when 64-bit chips become ubiquitous, and that's mostly in the low and mid-range. High-end 64-bit chips won't be available until the end of the year, but we'll start seeing kind of the successor to the Snapdragon 400, which is the 410, and the Snapdragon 615. They're both 64-bit devices or chips, and they're mid-range specs, but they support all of these new, ARM v8 architecture elements that will not necessarily make everything run faster, but it just give them a little bit more breathing room. And there's all kinds of battery improvements through Project Volta. So I mean, this is just the beginning. Android 5 looks great, but I think over time it's going to become a really powerful, good-looking OS with tons of great-looking apps that are available.
Sorry, my thing froze, so you guys went quiet. Sounds like, is someone asking something?
Yeah, I lost you in the feed. I thought Daniel was going for super dramatic pause mode.
Sorry. I missed the last bit.
Yeah, so I guess like this week's tete-a-tete we're going to talk about, and that'll be out tomorrow, talking about what is Lollipop really? I mean, if you're an Android fan, you're obviously going to look forward to it because it's an upgrade to a phone you currently have, or you're going to upgrade to a new device and get it through there. But if you're an iOS or Windows Phone users, are you really looking at Lollipop going, is it finally time to move over to an Android phone? And I think yes. I think finally, if you're looking to get a really great Android phone, you have all of the pieces now that can move you away from iOS if you really wanted to without missing too much. Do you disagree?
I'm just laughing at the fact that
well,
like if you're a Windows Phone user, is it time to finally switch to Android? And I was like, that happened ages ago.
I'm just giving Jeff Broussard the benefit of the doubt, okay?
Sorry.
Shout out.
Yeah. I think there are, so not to spoil our article, but I think there are still some pain points. But I think, as you said, they've eliminated a lot of the pains that you would have, and I think the most interesting thing is the fact that the power and the functionality is still there, but they've got a presentation layer that is appealing to the general populace, not people who are looking to build the phone into the way that they want it first and foremost. It can be like just the basic setup is one that is convenient and useful, but then there's still a lot of utility there. I think that's the most important thing. But the app situation, I spend most of my time in apps. As platforms evolve, the operating system becomes less and less important, and the applications which run on it kind of take over. And if app quality is suffering, then why would you want to use the not best version of all the apps that you spend all your time in? Now, whether that's the case, stay tuned for the post tomorrow. But I think that is maybe the final frontier.
Yeah, and that is major. That is
everyone just and then that's also ignoring all the benefits that Android just has over top other platforms. We're just talking about pain points.
Yeah, I think if you don't like iOS and you like Android, this is just going to reinforce your beliefs. I really, when I hear about people saying, "Oh, I don't like Apple because of XYZ decision that they made with iOS," I'm like, "Well, have you used iOS 8? Have you really? When was the last time you actually spent some time with an iOS device? Because it's certainly much more powerful and capable than it used to be in terms of things that Android users took for granted, like extensibility and continuity and stuff like that. I mean, continuity is something that works so well that you just forget about it until it's there, and you're like, oh wow, I can transfer all my documents seamlessly in real time. And I guess these are kind of value adds that Apple brings to the table, and we'll hear about Samsung doing a similar thing in a bit. But I just think overall, Android has become so good at making itself known across different screen sizes. I mean, we haven't spoken about the Nexus player, but I was using that a little, and that's the $99 set-top box that Google sells, or it's $109 in Canada, but they sell it, and it's the first Android TV powered device. And developers don't really have to change their apps very much. They just have to kind of modify it, add a few, large screen assets so that they can put it on the Play Store. But ultimately, I mean, it's still very much an Android machine, and you can play games and access apps and whatever. I mean, I think that's really the beauty of it, is that developers can just deploy one app across multiple screen sizes with material design pretty easily.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Well, I just think, going back to our previous conversation, I think for me the big thing is, it seems like, Google considers its with the Nexus line and phone design is they're just delivery mechanisms for big screens, which gives you more Android, which is their focus. But a lot of the issues that you were talking about come from the design of the phone itself, the physical hardware, the fact that the phone isn't just the delivery mechanism for the internet, but is a functional piece of your life. And I still haven't found the right phone to switch over to Android on, because I'm comfortable with Android. Like it's pretty good, but my touch point, my interaction point with Android, I haven't found the one that's right for me yet. So maybe that phone is the Moto X with bamboo. So
or
if there's anyone listening to this podcast that might be interested in confirming if that would be the best phone for me and know who I am and could reach out, that would be great. Guys.
Very subtle.
The Z3 Compact or the Xperia Z3, because those phones are also beautiful and well made.
As long as they're not in the colors that Daniel decided to purchase.
Oh, bite me.
Green is lovely. The green is so pretty.
So, just for the record, I bought a lime green Xperia Z3 Compact.
It's more like mint green, but okay.
Sorry,
I was going
mint
to say
green.
aquamarine, but
No, it's not aquamarine for sure.
What? Are you blind?
It's like a boxed wine that's gone bad months after people should have stopped drinking it.
Douglas is slagging me off for drinking boxed wine months after I purchased it. It was last week.
It's the months after you purchased it, not the boxed wine part.
Yeah, she was hoping to get away with not saying that.
Yeah.
No, I said once after I purchased it. No, it was I'm more than happy to admit I purchased it in July. Last week it still tasted fine. It's been getting me through every podcast. Anyway, this week it doesn't taste fine. It tastes like vinegar. Sorry,
Good.
Daniel. Let's give us a look at those phones.
So, if you're watching the video podcast, this is it. I've been reviewing it. It's a 4.6-inch device. I love it. I love the size. I've been using the Z3 as well, and I like that size too. And that's metal, and this is not. But personally, I prefer the size of the Z3 Compact over the Z3. I also think that Doug's point about how the hardware has not quite caught up to Apple in many ways. The Moto X to me would be the perfect phone if it had a good camera, and that's really the stinging point about an Android device, is that none of the Apple devices have anything to worry about when it comes to camera, like a competitor reaching them in terms of camera. An 8-megapixel camera may sound lower on paper, but somehow no Android device has been able to do for me what an iPhone 6 Plus has been able to do for me across all potential use cases. We're talking good light, bad light, indoors, flash, any possible photo you could think of taking, the iPhone excels. And that is just, I've done tests, I've done comparisons, and the iPhone wins every single time. The only phone that even comes close is the Nokia Lumia 1020, but that is not, I mean, that doesn't even enter into it because that's a camera more than a phone.
Yeah, and then, like unpacking my previous thought, when I am looking at phones, the two things for me are screen and camera. Mm-hmm. Like, so that's probably is a lot with it. Although, the Alpha's camera was pretty decent.
Sorry, go ahead.
The Samsung makes the best cameras on Android for sure, but their low light photography is just nowhere near what Apple is doing. I don't know what magic sauce is in that, but but somehow Apple just seems to be able to extract a better photo from less light.
Yeah, like the fact that I went around Ireland with my iPhone 5 and took just like great, like just the photos that I was able to take with that were just so impressive. Better, but
Android 5 actually has a much more capable camera API, and I think that developers will be able to access more of those sensors. And there's a pretty good overview in my Nexus 6 review about what the default camera app can do versus what a third-party camera app can do accessing the new camera API. And when you have manual controls and you really want to spend time with it, I think that there's going to be a lot of potential there. So
not a lot. I would argue that most people don't want to spend a lot of time with their pictures and like tweaking manual controls.
Yeah, that's like the total classic example of the approach where like Android has deep features for you to change every setting you need to get the perfect exposure, and I'm like, I can trust this phone wherever I go to point and shoot and get a great photo. Yeah. Like I'm on top of a mountain in Ireland, holding my iPhone in panoramic mode and coming up with just something that's going to look great.
Yeah, 100%. And I really hope that Google hears the criticisms of the default camera app and makes some adjustments, because right now it's too limited. It's limited to 1/10, 1/10 of a second shutter speed, and 1200 ISO, which is too low, and there's no reason for that. It's just Motorola being conservative.
Well, but I think camera is a really good example. And prior to like the evolution of phones where we got kind of like system on a chip and like the radio stuff, those used to be kind of really important. But now the thing where it's a really great advantage to be making the hardware and the software is the camera, because that's one spot where the interaction between the hardware and the software is like at its most important. Both in terms of like how the sensors are working, but then also how like those half-second, like the user interface in the app itself to take advantage of that stuff, like that takes a lot of fine-tuning. And if you have one company, making the choices on the lenses and the sensors and how that's going to work, and another company offering up a generic experience, it's just not going to be honed in the way that it should be or could be.
Yeah, but I also, Apple has no more advantage than Google in this sense, because Apple doesn't make the sensor.
They don't make their own sensors.
They actually just procure a Sony sensor, and while it may be a custom-made Sony sensor, it's no better a sensor than the IMX214 on the Nexus 6, nor the IMX240 on the Galaxy S5 or the Note 4.
Has the camera on the Z3.
It's good, but it's also hampered by poor software. I mean, there's far too much sharpening on all of the photos. It should be better than it is, considering that Sony makes the sensor, and has access to improving the Android camera API itself. Like, their photography chops should be way better than they are. So I haven't tested it really in depth because I was waiting for this weekend to do that. But from what I've seen, the color saturation is a little bit off. The shutter speed's a little bit slow. Sometimes the camera crashes, which should never happen. Like, there's just little things that I'm disappointed in.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, it's a good camera. It's a really good camera. It's a high resolution. It's 20.7 megapixels. So BlackBerry did some shit this week. Doug, do you want to go over some of the shit that BlackBerry did?
Okay.
Because Bez 12 was announced, or it was now available.
Yes. Okay, so I guess Bez 12 is the best way to get into it. So BlackBerry, in deciding that it would like to exist as a company still, this decade and maybe the next, has shifted to be an enterprise services company. Being an enterprise services company requires you to have enterprise services. So the big lead up for them at their I think enterprise portfolio launch event, which is an interesting name, is launching a portfolio of enterprise services, all of which in some way connect to BES 12, which is their mobility management software. So the tools for IT admins at companies to...
Hang on. Oh, go ahead. I just have to...
Do your thing. I'm going to talk about BlackBerry.
Okay, tell me about
it. So it's the
boring
software... Yeah, well, so it's the software that IT admins use to roll out devices in the enterprise or to manage BYOD devices, bring your own devices from employees, and manage all the software on them, secure information, basically lock it down. This has been a huge source of revenue for BlackBerry in the past, and BES 12 is kind of the tool that allows them to merge not only management of legacy BlackBerry OS devices, but also BlackBerry 10 devices, because previously you'd have people having to run 2 BES setups to manage.
Which is ridiculous.
Yes, which is a little ridiculous. But BES 12 is also this cool platform that is now plugging into a variety of other services. So everything that you've seen with like BBM Protected, BBM Meeting, their partnership with Samsung for the Knox stuff, as well as agreements with Salesforce, and I'm forgetting the name of the video company. Where I'm just trying to think. Whatever, it's Friday. You can read the post. I wrote it up. But so they are kind of wrapping this around all other enterprise services to be kind of the Uber control and additional security touch point for enterprises. They're trying to make it as difficult as possible for an IT admin to say no to bringing that in, and allowing it to control anything that's the IT people at a company would need to through it to keep it locked in. And it's, when you look at their portfolio stuff, like some of it's like really dumb, or not dumb, not interesting or pertinent to us, like new ways of doing two-factor authentication where you don't need a VPN key because you can do it through your credentials, and BlackBerry handles the authentication. Like it all makes sense for the company that they're trying to be. In terms of dropping the mic of a portfolio of services, pretty well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the stock's improved as a result of Chen's announcements. I mean, they seem measured. There was a barrage of press releases and announcements this week, but what they say is that BlackBerry has its priorities straight. There was one device announcement, the Classic, and everything else was, we're going to make your enterprise experience better, even if you're not using a BlackBerry phone. So BlackBerry Meetings, for example, will be available on iOS, Android, Mac, Windows, and BlackBerry phones. And then there's BlackBerry's partnership with Samsung, which is really interesting. Tell us about that.
Okay, so I touched upon it briefly, but so Samsung has their own enterprise security-grade software for Samsung-only devices called Knox. With Knox 2.0, I believe earlier this year, they signed an agreement with Google to take some of those baseline security features and roll them out across Lollipop in its entirety. But if you want the good stuff, you have to be using a Samsung phone. Samsung and BlackBerry, once hated rivals, have now partnered so that Knox can be an extension within BES 12, so that you can use BES 12 to manage Samsung devices, take advantage of Knox additional security features, which deal with I haven't dug too deep into it, but a lot of it is a very much Android-specific type security things around this package of BlackBerry's encryption, security, and then management tools, which is pretty cool. I think the bigger deal, in fact, is that BlackBerry, because of the partnership, Samsung will sell BES 12 to their customers when they're selling Knox. So it's like, hey, we have this we want to get into enterprise as well. We have this Knox thing if you have Samsung devices, and then also if you're BES inclined, you can buy BES 12. And I think that's great for them because the more people BlackBerry has selling the things that make them money for them, the better off they'll be. I think with the Salesforce integration, that's a really big deal too.
Yeah, there's something very smart about these partnerships. I think, we heard of their partnership with Movirtue. We heard of their acquisition of SecuSmart. I mean, these are all things that you were like.
No, so it was a partnership with SecuSmart and an acquisition of Movirtue. So
sorry.
Yeah, one of the announcements that they had was, I'm whiffing on the name, but it's basically a rebranded Movirtue, which allows a company to provision a second phone number to a device. So for people bringing devices in the enterprise, you can have your phone number on that. And the important thing there is that because it's provisioned separately, they can track any work phone calls, data use, or text messaging in your work life can be tracked, so that for example, in like the state of California, where it's a law that employees get reimbursed for any cost to them, any work costs on their personal phones can be tracked and managed, and it also is a second layer of security. So like just the speed in which they are able to turn that around, like you said, it seems like they have their ducks in a row. How BlackBerry Classic plays into that, I don't know if we even want to do that on this podcast, but in terms of like an enterprise services company providing services, like it's pretty cool. I haven't spent time using Balance at all. Is Balance it? I'm just whiffing on names.
BlackBerry Blend.
Blend, thank you. Yeah, Balance is something else. I haven't spent any time with it, but it seems really cool. And BBM Meetings, as we said before, like the ability for your phone to call you to immediately join you to the meeting you have scheduled is great. Like, thank you for finally solving something that's been plaguing us for 15, 20 years.
Sure.
I mean, I think most people who are listening will probably be interested in talking about the Classic a little. $499 for the phone outright. It'll probably be about $99 on contract, or maybe even free, depending on the carrier. Yeah. It's not a powerful phone in comparison to the Passport. It's actually got the same specs as the Xperia the BlackBerry Z3, I believe.
Yeah.
So not a weak phone by any means, but if you're comparing specs, it's not an up-to-date device. But you don't really need it on BlackBerry 10, and people are going to go nuts for these keys again. Those ridiculous, unnecessary toolbar or toolkit keys.
Okay.
But there you go.
Okay. So I can't write like a 3,000-word review about a year-old iPad and say the specs aren't as important as the experience, and then criticize BlackBerry for having a 2-year-old chip in a 2014 phone, because it's about the experience.
Yeah.
What I can criticize is their desire to pursue an experience that so far has netted them little revenue in the past 3 years. I know that there's been hype. I think because they're calling it the Classic, there's like this weird retro. It's like, oh, cool. Like on our podcast last week, they're bringing back the Walkman. Wonder what that's gonna be like. And everyone's gonna be like, oh yeah, it's still a BlackBerry.
Yeah.
It's the friggin' Q10. It's the Bold 9900. Nobody bought those. What makes this any different? Like what makes it?
There's a very specific use case, and Chen said that he believes that there are a bunch of Bold 9900 users who are holding on to those devices because of that toolbar, and they're the ones who are going to update to the Classic. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's going to make them a ton of money, but at least they're appealing to a certain demographic of people.
I bet they make more staff revenue off those old holdout devices than they'll make off of classic sales. But yeah, like I just don't get it. I don't like, to be honest. I think like, and especially the way that the classic is talked about in presentations and things like that. I think the classic is this thing that it's a carrot that he dangles around to garner attention because it's a piece of hardware. It's that familiar BlackBerry story. And he's like, yeah, pay attention to me for a minute. Here's the classic. Now here's all these enterprise services because that's what's actually going to make the money.
We talked about that before, I think. When they announced the Passport, we were like, it was kind of like a thing of like, oh, look over here, weird phone. Okay, now let's talk about what we actually give a shit about.
Yeah, and he did that. He did that at the event again. Obviously, just teasing out some pricing details. Although he also did like, hey, here's a red Passport, come this Christmas. Boop, boop. I don't know. It's a cool presentation style. It's working for them, but you know, they don't get. People will cover the hardware. They won't cover the partnership with Salesforce. But like that's more important at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that was why our buddy Jeff Gadway spent so long talking about Blend at the Passport launch, because I think Blend, and we've spoken about this before, is really the big talk point here. You know, they've come out with a lot of interesting cloud software that's backed by the patented BlackBerry security story, and that's really interesting because they're sort of doing what Microsoft's doing, is that they're expanding beyond the BlackBerry ecosystem while making sure that the BlackBerry name is in as many pots as possible.
Yeah, the touch points don't matter. It's all about the services because they're going to secure the data as best they can. And if you want the most secure, use our BlackBerry devices. But it seems like it's like a more thoroughly thought out Dropbox. You know?
Yeah, I mean, they've also been about provisioning, right? Like once you have a Bez box set up, it's fairly easy to control dozens of devices. And they've come out and said many times, like our competitors, Mobile Iron and Juniper and all of those ones, they all come out, they all say like BlackBerry's too expensive, and we do what they do for half the cost, and we have way more devices that we're compatible with. BlackBerry's now reached the point where they can say we can control basically every device on the market. We are maybe more expensive, but you're getting better value for your money.
Yeah, and our premium service is amazing. Like, yes, their competitors say that they charge too much, but then everyone who uses Bez is like, I love it. Like, they don't necessarily have to win over the IT admins. They have to win over other people. And in the past, it was an issue where you're like, oh, hey, you have to use Bez 5 and Bez 10. And now it's like Bez 12 is the hub for everything.
Yeah, and if you don't want to set up a box, you can just buy Cloud Bez or whatever it's called.
Cloud Bez?
They need to work on their naming. You guys are whiffing and flubbing all these names.
I mean, let's be fair. There are far too many products now.
Yeah. It's always like Work Life for BlackBerry or BBM. It's either BBM something or something for BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Also,
it's the bits that come before and after that we have the problems with. It's the somethings that we have the problem with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking on their site now. They have solutions, enterprise mobility management, EMM. Mm-hmm. They have identity and access, regulated industries, communication and collaboration. They have Bez 12, secure workspace, BBM protected, BBM meetings, BlackBerry Blend, enterprise identity, VPN authentication, work life, secure services and support. So like it's pretty confusing. But if you're an IT manager, you probably already know most of this. So
yeah, you don't care about like the sexiness of the utility is a thing, not the name. Mm-hmm. It does make it hard to kind of get up, be like, oh yeah, work life, like BBM BlackBerry identity, but like it just doesn't matter. They're gonna make money. That's the thing.
You know what's interesting here is that they're differentiating. So I'm looking at their subscription pricing. They have two. They have silver and gold, mm-hmm. and silver is differentiated from gold by having secure access on iOS and Android. So all BlackBerry devices have secure access, secure container, secure browser. But the silver version of Bez 12 for iOS and Android does not have secure connection. It just has mobile app management and mobile app device management.
So basically you're paying to run data through their NOC.
Yeah.
I think, or use whatever wrapper that they have now to allow non-BlackBerry devices to communicate with their NOC. And there's obviously a cost associated with that. Previously, that would be the thing that they would charge carriers, which carriers would then pass on to customers for BlackBerry devices. Like they would make their money off of a phone sale. They'd make their money off of the $9 a month charge every month for access for that BlackBerry to travel on their networks, and now they've extended that out. So they gold that up. And then I also think there's tiers within the silver and the gold for the premium support, which is like double the price or like 50% more. Sorry, not double the price. But we did an interview with the guys, the Formula One team that was using Bez 12, and they say like their premium support. Like it's not just like, hey, this is broken, can you fix it? It's like, we need to migrate 12 servers and these programs into this thing. They're like, okay, we'll tell you how to do that. We'll do it with you, and maybe we'll help build a tool for the migration process. Like that in the enterprise world, that's the sexiest thing possible for an IT admin.
Yeah, but it's not the sexiest thing to talk about on a podcast. So
no.
Let's talk about Samsung, because they also had a bit of a developer-focused week, but they're also launching a few consumer products. The Gear S launched today in Canada for $399, and if you're not familiar with the Gear S, it's Samsung's Tizen-powered, cellular-powered smartwatch. Yes, this is a cellular-enabled smartwatch that connects to a data network. Mm-hmm. Now, why would you need that when you're going to have a smartphone in your pocket? Well, Samsung says you don't need a smartphone in your pocket with the Gear S. It just works. You can stream music. You can track your runs. You can do a bunch of stuff that your phone wouldn't allow you to do, or that you wouldn't allow your smartwatch wouldn't be able to do without your phone ordinarily. It comes with a GPS, a heart rate monitor, compass, barometer, so all the good stuff. But $400 is a lot of money.
It really is, and that's not including whatever friggin' wearables contract you're going to be signing.
Yeah, I mean that's another point that it's going to be interesting, right? Because the carriers have been pushing these share plans, and we don't know exactly what they're going to do when they see these connected devices on their network. Are they just going to add them to your share plan like a tablet, so an extra $5 or $10 a month? I don't know.
Well, so has there been any indication that they're going to pursue kind of what AT&T is doing in the U.S.?
Not yet, but they're probably. I mean, it's inevitable, right? Because this is just the first of many connected smartwatches and other wearables.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hey, Tizen. Tizen lives. It lives on your wrist. That's cool. But to be honest, I think their other announcements were more interesting, even if they're familiar.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting thing is the advanced S Pen, which is double the sensitivity of the former one that comes with the Note 4, has tilt and rotation control. This is going to be good for people making, who really take advantage of sort of the creative aspects of their Note devices.
How much does it cost? Have they talked about that yet?
No, they just kind of glanced over it in the keynote. I don't know.
I signed for a cab last night using Square and a S Pen on a Note.
Cool.
We're living in a phablet world, so now we need hyper powerful pens.
And I'm a phablet girl.
We are living in a... Sorry. Anyway, moving on.
That looked really good with your green headphones on, by the way.
I was really excited. I was like, it's a Madonna reference.
We can add those more often if you want.
Well, just any kind of sing-along references would be good.
Okay, all right, we can do that.
Maybe we should throw them in a post and see if our readers recognize references.
The other thing that they announced was Flow, which is basically continuity for Samsung devices.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell is Samsung doing trying to do cloud services? I know that they want to be a platform company and not a hardware company, but I can foresee nothing going right with this with this move?
Well, what do you foresee going wrong with it?
I mean, Samsung's never really been a company that works well in the cloud, right? Like all of their hubs and their own kind of cloud-based solutions have not really taken off. They've just been boring. You know, they have a lot of those group share things where you can share a song between several Samsung devices. There was always latency problems with it. You know, they've taken, like they have that all share thing where you can quickly share content between Samsung products. They really tried to push that when their smart TVs launched because they want people to be able to push content to their TVs. This is interesting, and I think it could be really cool if developers, you know, integrate it. But like the S Pen SDK, it's been a little bit slow on the uptake.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the problem that Samsung always have. Samsung really puts a lot of importance on, hey, the more Samsung-y stuff you have, the more you win. It's like Lotto. But the problem is that people might have a Samsung phone, but then no other Samsung things. And developers are less than likely to take the time to integrate this when they can just wait for Google to introduce it into Android as a whole, so they don't have to, you know, thin slice out a certain number of devices. I do think that there are some cool features in there, like when you can schedule reminders for tasks and things that will only pop up when you're using the right device. So it won't be like, call mom when you're on your tablet. It'll do that when you have your phone up and live, things like that. I think they're taking a little bit, not necessarily farther, but a little bit more evolved than what Apple has done so far. But, like, again, you know, Samsung wants to be this thing that it's not. It wants to be taken seriously as a platform, and it's not. It's a reskin of Android.
Look, I think Samsung's always been very ambitious with this kind of stuff. They launch new services and products with gusto, and they advertise the shit out of them, and they give you 6 months free. But eventually people don't use them, and they obfuscate them, or they disable them completely. You know, they made a big deal about being able to buy your own music and your own movies on the Samsung Hub, and then less than 2 years later they shut those down. The Samsung, you know, the App Store is now Galaxy Apps and is basically devoid of any valuable content.
Yeah, and they were really playing up health at the developer conference the other day, and like, how is that going for them? There was 2 health apps that I could use in the Samsung store with their health app when I reviewed the alpha, and that was a month and a half ago. Like 2 apps.
And didn't you also I read that review, and you didn't exactly enjoy your experiences when you were using those apps because you were like, oh, everything requires like a lot of user input.
Well, no. So no, the thing was you can input your own personal health information, but then that's just a notepad. Like if you're writing it down, which then allows you to read it, it's not an application. It's just a digital piece of paper. So if you don't have apps connected into it, where they're dumping the information, then it's like the same thing with Microsoft with their health. They're trying to get everyone to use their APIs, like for any device, just be totally agnostic so they can collect the information. Yeah. But Samsung only does it for Samsung stuff. Which
and that's the thing. So they got this SIM-band thing, and it's their focus. It's their really big push for developers for fitness and health. And it's this whole like, you know, they've got like a development kit for it, and it's this piece of hardware where it's like rigged out with sensors out the wazoo. Problem is that all roads lead to Tizen at the end of the day. Like, it's not going to be like there's not going to be the same level of integration that you have with Android Wear. So even if they've got this like tricked out piece of like this prototype, and it's, I don't know.
Okay, I see that, but at the same time, Android Wear is a right now barren landscape of potential, right? If Samsung can create a really great integrated platform where your Samsung phone talks to your Samsung smartwatch and relays that data properly to your, you know, other Samsung ecosystems. I mean, that's the reason that Apple has become so successful. People don't want to leave that ecosystem because there's so much value there. I don't see Samsung introducing something anymore. I mean, I don't think they're just going to give up on their health push. Health is
No, I
so
think they will
important to
either.
so many companies.
I think they've got like I think my point is that they've got the guts of what could be a really awesome ecosystem, but the problem at the same time is that it's not Apple and it's not Android, so a lot of people are just going to be like, oh, well, that's Samsung only, so I don't have a Samsung phone, or I don't want to buy a Samsung phone.
Yes.
So many people do have Samsung phones. It's still the #1 Android platform by far.
Okay,
but it's Android platform. They're not buying it because it's Samsung. They're buying it because it's Android.
Well, they might buy it because
they're not. Samsung. They're totally buying it because it's Samsung. Most people don't even. Some people don't even know that they're buying an Android phone when they buy a Galaxy.
Yeah, but that's because they cannot distinguish between the Samsung experience and the Android experience.
Right, but that's because Samsung has done all they can to make sure that when somebody thinks of an Android phone, they think of Samsung.
Yeah, but then now they're going towards developing an ecosystem that isn't Android, it's something else. So people are going to look at it and be like, oh, this is not...
This is even less than the thing. But okay, so I get what Samsung is trying to do. I know they have a vested interest in not just being, the icing on top of Google's cake. And your point about, Apple's network effects in the ecosystem is well taken. But Apple didn't start with all those services and then sell a lot of hardware. They sold a shit ton of hardware, and then which allowed them to have those network effects of people buying in, like being 1% of all of transactions at certain company X within a week of introducing Apple Pay, because there's so many iOS devices. They can do that. If Samsung wants that to happen, you can, like the software features that require a robust ecosystem are not going to lead to the device sales that will generate the robust ecosystem. Especially when, if I'm an Android developer, I might know that there's a junk ton of Samsung devices out there, but I need to support the platform as a whole. So if Samsung's doing something that is exactly the same as Google is doing, but with S in front of it, or something that Google's going to get to in 6 months, I'm not going to waste the resources. I'm going to go with Android Wear, because then I have to build it once, and it goes across all Android devices. So, they're in a really tough spot.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, you talk about Apple being a hardware company. Samsung has here, up until now been a hardware company, and they're still very much making their money from mobile devices, and that's not going to change anytime soon. Apple makes a little bit of money from the App Store and from developers in general, but not much compared to their iPhone profits. Samsung has the volume. I mean, they sell more devices than Apple does, and they have the brand recognition. The Galaxy brand is probably more well known than Android, and that's why you see so much Android marketing right now around Lollipop. You see Android, advertisements and billboards and on bus shelters and stuff. Mm-hmm. I was in New York yesterday, and the new Android campaign was everywhere, and that's because Google is trying to reclaim some of that recognition away from Samsung.
Yeah. And also the OS is now ready for prime time, right?
Well, yeah. A lot of people would argue that it was ready for prime time a long time ago.
By prime time, I mean mom time.
Home time. It's
right.
ready for Oprah.
Yeah.
But Samsung has been trying to get their devices in the hands of moms and Oprahs for many years, and I mean they've done a decent job. Going back to my streetcar, purview, I look around and I see Galaxies and I see iPhones. Generally that's what I see, and the market share stats back that up. So
yeah, it's not like Samsung's doing anything wrong. It's just a matter of timing. It's not 2007 anymore. Like, if Samsung had released a great Galaxy phone around the same time as the iPhone on its own platform, they might be in this position. But it's like when you have when the field is laid out, when the chessboard is like set up, it's very, you have to be doing something so much better to defeat that.
Yeah, I mean Samsung's in an impossible position. They have no choice but to try to build the services on top of Android and try to bypass Android as much as possible. So Tizen exists for a reason, but they're never going to get rid of Android, and I think that they need to understand that developers are going to support Samsung devices first because they're the highest market share, but they're not only going to support Samsung devices. So,
but they're going to support Samsung devices as Android devices, not Samsung as its own platform.
Right.
I think if they can do something so crazy with their wearables that then Tizen gets like a significant percent, like if they can make like Tizen an amazing wearables platform that like just dominates what Android Wear can do, that's an opening, because the wearables is like just beginning, but it's not going to be phones.
I don't think you need a million apps on a wearables app store. I think if Samsung can get the partnerships it needs to make 10 great Tizen for wearables apps, like they partner with Nokia for Here maps on their Gear S. They have Line doing a partnership with for IM. If they can get the right partnerships, they don't really need to worry about volume. So
it's partnerships and compatibility, right?
Yeah. Like Daniel, you're making the argument that everyone who's not Google or Apple has made, and they've all been wrong.
But what I'm saying is that Android Wear developers, Android developers don't have to do anything to make their apps compatible with Wear. But at the same time, they still have to do a lot of work to make their apps good on Wear. And you don't want apps on your smartwatch. You want experiences on your smartwatch.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the number of apps available for Android Wear right now is, while the number may seem high, there may be 10,000 or 1,000 or whatever it is. Most of them don't do anything. They just mirror the notifications from your smartphone. Samsung has an opportunity here. As you said, the market is nascent. It's still being explored, and I think Tizen is not bad. I mean, I've used the Gear 2. I think it's a decent smartwatch. It has potential. And the Gear S seems like it's a much better version of that smartwatch experience. So Flow could be another form of that, right? They could use Flow to make it possible to start something on your smartwatch, continue it on your smartphone or tablet, and then go complete the circle.
But if it only becomes good after you decided to buy all the Samsung things, it's not a thing that goes and makes you want to buy Samsung things. They need to release stuff that's like, holy crap, that's so good, I'm going to go out and buy Samsung stuff to use that. And then you'll have a room full of Samsung stuff, and then you'll see network benefits. But if it's like, if you live in a Samsung world, all of this is great, how do you get people to be there? I don't know.
It's true, and after there's that argument with the Apple Watch too. I know a lot of people who are like, oh, I want to get the Apple Watch, like, is it going to work with my Android? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. They're like, maybe I should get an iPhone then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
and I was like, well, you can just get an Android Wear watch, and they're like, no, I don't want what you have. I want the Apple Watch. And I'm like, okay, well.
So maybe if they go out and make a $500 Gear S.
Or a $5,000 Gear S.
Yeah. Or a $50,000. What was the report? The gold-plated one was going to be like.
I think it's like $5,000.
5 to 10 grand.
5 to 10. Okay.
So not bad. Daniel, you'll get us review units, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
We are not giving that back. We're selling it, and we're going on a team vacation in Mexico.
Well, we're going to melt it down and then make MobileSyrup branded necklaces out of
Grills.
it. Yeah. Grills, yeah, even better.
Readers might not know that we also bought cash for gold.
Yeah, we're actually John Oliver in disguise.
Oh. That guy.
I buy your jewelry.
He's a South African jewel. He's the pride of your nation, right?
He is certainly that. Everybody hates him.
Really?
Oh yeah, they're super embarrassed by him.
I'm shocked. What else have we got?
You know what we weren't shocked about? That the Lumia 535 is a piece of crap. The first Lumia device from Microsoft is a low-power, low-cost Lumia that we've seen before. It's It's got a 5-inch QHD display, 1 gig of RAM, blah blah blah, 5 megapixel. Doug's sleeping.
You think they would have?
I'm not sleeping. It's like I feel like it's like Nokia slept with their girlfriend and they're gonna do whatever they can to just piss on that brain. Like why? Like who? Like come on.
No, I think it's just stupid that it was like they looked at their calendar, like they had the Nokia, they acquired Nokia's calendar, and then they had a calendar for marketing that was like, oh yeah, and then in November we're gonna switch from Nokia Lumia to Microsoft Lumia. And then they just were like, yeah, and then we should just release that shitty phone right after. Like, they just didn't change anything. They didn't look at their change in branding and say, it might be a good move for us to release a significant device after we do that branding change. Or
it's almost as if Steven Elop isn't good at his job.
It's almost as if Steve Ballmer made this acquisition decision.
Both of those things may or may not be true.
Yes. Yeah, guys named Steve. Hey, Daniel, you wrote about this, didn't you? Nokia making a comeback?
Yeah, sort of. They're thinking about getting back into the consumer smartphone market. I'm not sure how that would work. But
the Nokia awkward.
Powered by Tizen.
Yeah.
The Nokia Kin. Microsoft's not using that anymore.
Ooh, that's good.
Remember Migo?
Oh, I like the N9. The N9 was a good phone.
Remigo.
Remigo.
It's just like, you know how we were talking about, it seemed like BlackBerry was really focused and delivering and had all their ducks in the row? Starting from Samsung and then just trending downward, we've gone to companies who are obviously in the midst of schizophrenic changes in their strategy. And at least Samsung's like, whatever, we're in it to win it. Even if it takes 10 years, Tizen's going to be a thing. Versus, oh yeah, we're not in this anymore. Oh, now we're going to buy it back. Oh, now we're going to make this. No more phones. We're all mobile and cloud. It's tough to see a company running in one way and then trying to stop going over the cliff before it can run back.
Yeah, like in those cartoons.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to turn a company in a different direction. There's a lot of inertia there. And when you're running in serpentine patterns...
Well, then the Wile E. Coyote, known as Nokia,
Isn't
going
there
to fall.
a point where a big anvil comes and falls on the entire smartphone strategy and just, like, they start again?
That was the burning platform memo.
And then it happened exactly like it is in the cartoon, in which the anvil moves and whatever was stuck under it comes out all bent out of shape and shitty, and then has to continue on.
I like that we took that analogy to the bitter end.
Who's Roadrunner in this situation?
What?
Me.
Who's the Roadrunner? Would the Roadrunner be Steven Elop because he's sly?
Well, he keeps finding a way to get paid.
What's that Finnish company that was born out of ex-Nokia employees that released that really weird smartphone, Sailfish?
Sailfish, yeah.
God bless.
That's the OS.
There's a lot of good people that worked at that company who did some really great things. It's just tough. Do we got some non-depressing news?
Totally, yes. So, Wind is in talks with Videotron about expanding. Videotron is in talks with Wind about expanding outside of Quebec. I think this is good news. I mean, they've been talking about this for a while, but it could happen now. The CFO from Videotron said that he's been in talks with Wind's new backer, what's it called? The name's escaping me. Westlake, I believe. Yeah. And they are talking to everybody about everything. So they're waiting for the government to decide on on the domestic roaming.
Same.
But it'll happen eventually. I think next year. Once
Mr. Handsome Face CEO is making stuff happen.
Oh yeah.
Who's this?
Wind dude, right?
No, he's not the CEO anymore. He's the chairman.
Chairman of the Handsome.
Chairman Handsome.
Chairman Handsome.
Yeah. I got to shake his hand once.
Oh, did he get some of his handsome on you?
I look at me.
Did you walk
obviously.
away feeling more confident?
Well,
I'm going to say this on the podcast because we never remember, and then after the podcast we're like, what should we call it? This podcast must be named either Chairman Handsome or a guy's named Steve. Or at least those two names are in the pole position.
all right, okay. We should have a live vote next time on the name of the podcast while we're potting.
Yeah, we should. What else we got on here?
Well,
Taylor Swift, still a moron.
Swift, your post, though, not moronic. Your post had, you would say 17 Taylor Swift puns?
Okay, so when this came up, I said, please, can I do it? I'm going to use all the Taylor Swift puns. And Daniel was like, how many can you really fit in there? And I was like, oh, a lot. A lot. And then he said he would give me a full-size chocolate bar of my choosing for every one that I fit in there, which is why it was riddled with Taylor Swift quotes. Yeah, 15 in total. After the two that Daniel vetoed.
We argued that there were 14 at the end. But either way, I'm going to go broke buying you chocolate bars.
Yeah, you're going to the poorhouse.
That's okay. I'll have some as well.
In the bread line, and I'll be like swimming in Kit Kat Chunkies.
I don't think you'll be swimming at all. I think you're going to sink like a chocolate-covered stone.
In a diabetic fit. Anyway, yes.
Okay, why is Taylor Swift dumb? I think she's totally right, and I love that she keeps swinging back when Spotify makes BS press announcements about the total amount of revenue released when...
She's dumb because her argument is good, but the way she, like, her point is basically what I think it is that she's like, hey, like, they're not giving me enough money, they're not, like, adequately compensating me for my work, so I'm gonna pull my stuff off there, which is fine.
Where's the blonde, you're blonde shaming is what you're doing.
No, I'm not, that's fine, she can say that if she wants to, but the way she's framing her argument is, streaming is stupid, and streaming is bad, and streaming is the same as going into an art gallery and tearing a piece off a painting, when she still has her content on many other streaming services that probably are compensating her adequately.
No, they're down now. They've been pulled from Rdio and stuff.
No, they haven't. Rdio still has all of her back catalog.
Really?
Yeah.
So I think what we need to differentiate between is Taylor Swift as a businesswoman and Taylor Swift as an artist. Because I think as an artist, she wants as much of her music heard by as many people as possible.
Yeah.
I think she said that before, and as a result of that, she experimented with streaming. What frustrates me about this whole thing is that Taylor Swift is an aberration. She earned more money in one weekend from her new album sales than most artists will see in their lifetime from the same. And streaming is not about the Taylor Swift. It's about the small town artists who don't really have a venue for distribution, who need every cent that they can get from multiple streams, and this makes it easy for them to put their stuff on there and be heard. And,
right. And
that's important.
It is important, but like Doug's point was, it's fine to say, well, Taylor Swift makes a filthy amount of money and she doesn't need any more. But the problem is that you have many other small artists on Spotify and the like who are getting paid a pittance for their work. And it's just because Taylor Swift has the volume to make it a lot of money doesn't mean that other artists who don't have the volume are making money.
Yes.
But she was also arguing that same thing for other artists, that they're not making enough money either.
So that's her argument, and that's fine. But she doesn't need to be pissing and moaning about how streaming is bad and streaming is not the answer. Streaming is the answer as long as you can negotiate a good deal.
Well, that's the thing. They said that. I think she's using
pissing and moaning. That's negotiating, and I think there is a bit of.
She's not negotiating.
We don't know that. I mean, this could be the Amazon Hatchet thing all over again, right? They're doing this publicly to get people on one side or another, right?
But
Daniel Ek came out and said that he wants people to understand the way that streaming works. It's not the same business model as going into a store and buying a CD. Right? There's no overhead there.
Yeah.
They pay as much to the artist as they can with the amount of money that they get from subscription. Right? There's still it's a growing industry. These artists need to stay with them because what's the downside to them? right? Like you're limiting. I know Broken Bells, for example, released 4 songs of their new album earlier this year on streaming sites to encourage people to buy the rest of the album. That is bullshit. What it did was it got me to download the album illegally because I heard the first 4 songs and I was like,
that's ridiculous. I think people need to change their attitudes then because, like, hey, here's free music. And if you like it, you can buy it on this album.
I was paying for RDO. It's not free music.
Yeah, and that I agree, because what's stopping me from going out and buying Taylor Swift's album, leaving aside that my taste in music is obviously questionable, but it's the fact that, okay, what am I going to do? Open iTunes and buy it, or go into a shop and buy a fucking CD, God forbid. But then my problem is that I'm like, no, I listen to all my music on streaming services, all of it. I don't want to open up another app or like launch iTunes or rip it from a CD just for that one album.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so then you're living in a world where the people who make the music that you really enjoy don't have enough to live on, or you're like stealing. So, if the convenience factor.
No, because I'm more than happy to go and see them play a show and buy their T-shirts and buy their merchandise.
Yeah, this is a legal business model, Doug.
Yeah,
this is not. This is something that the artists embrace. This the artists want their music on there.
I know that the streaming part is legal. I know. I said the other alternative is illegal. And
which is why I won't do that. So now I'm just sitting here, 1989-less, wishing I knew what the rest of the album sounded like.
Yeah. So you also go to shows and you maybe buy some merch. Like the percentage of money that artists who are not Taylor Swift make from that is either enough to pay for the trip, the tour, or certainly not enough to live on. So I just think we have to be more honest about the way that we...
The U2 360 tour made $736 million.
We're really talking about U2 and Taylor Swift, and talk about Grizzly Bear. Talk about any Canadian artist.
I'm not saying that. No, but what I'm agreeing with
across this country touring is the most expensive proposition in the goddamn world. Getting from Halifax to Vancouver.
But they're still facing the same problem that they were facing 5 years ago, which was falling album sales. People aren't buying CDs anymore.
Yeah, and now people aren't buying the albums at all.
I'm paying for it. I'm streaming. I pay for it.
Paying the artist for it is the argument that they're making.
But then my point is that it's not my fault, and Taylor Swift is making that about my fault. Taylor Swift is saying Spotify's a shitty company, so you have to go out and buy my album.
Well, it's weird that you would take that argument and see it as you being one of the persons at fault, but if you
I don't know why she isn't negotiating something with Spotify. That's what I don't understand.
She is negotiating.
How is she negotiating with CEO streaming services to tearing paintings apart? She's saying the streaming service model doesn't work.
Because it doesn't.
That's not negotiation. That's publicly slamming the entire platform and saying that it's not worth it for her.
Which is a negotiation. You know why? Because the company A wrote an open letter asking her to come back, and then B, the CEO has responded directly. That's a negotiation. And she's one of the few artists that can do it because she can move 1 million units of her new album in a weekend. Because every other artist below that level, if you're not U2 and you're not Taylor Swift, you're screwed. So yes, streaming is bad for musicians.
Why are the likes of Ed Sheeran and Ariana Grande doing exclusive things like Spotify?
Because it's a new business model and they're trying to make it work. And it's a new way for people to hear their music that wouldn't have otherwise heard it.
Is Ariana Grande in control of her business and career in the way that Taylor Swift is?
Well, I don't think we know enough about each of them. I don't know if Taylor Swift is in control of her business.
Yesterday.
Well, writing an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal is a pretty direct move.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, she's got good people behind her making sure that she's doing business-conscious things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So we are going to wrap up for this SyrupCast. Thank you to everybody for listening and for your allowance for us to extend our podcast beyond
7 hours.
Beyond an hour. We did about almost 2 hours last week, and people were pretty okay with it. So this one I hope was as I don't know, fun to listen to as last week's. I think that was a high bar, but I think we did okay. As always, thank you very much, Douglas. You are a gem among the coal. And Jane, you are the cutest green headphone wearing PC builder I've ever seen.
I'm getting like that horrible tightness like in my jaw where all the pressure is crushing my brain. But
okay.
Thank you. Well, you are as ever fantastic, and we do not
thank
you. But please stay.
I will be here always. I'm just never going to hang up. You guys can go.
You hang up.
That is you. That is our SyrupCast for this week. Thank you, everybody. Shout outs to all of you. We don't have time for individual ones this week. And we will see you next week.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.